talk about leaving it all on the field. We print people, and I count myself as one of those because I started out as a newspaper reporter, put it all in print. So please, take a copy of the latest Northeaster before you go, and you can read all about Kerry in here. But we'll talk a little today. I'm Susie Hagan, and I met Kerry and Margot in 1998 when I worked in a community development program in Northeast Minneapolis. I'll lead off speaking, followed by and occasionally alternating with Carl Reichert, an old friend of Margot's, reading for some people who were either not able to be with us today or who are a little too shy to come up and speak for themselves, but who also illustrate different aspects of Kerry's life. After the speakers, you're all invited to say a few words. Since this is stationary, as you can see, you're going to have to come up and queue just down this aisle if you don't mind, kind of like in the old community action meeting days. And finally, would it be anything for Kerry without closing with music? So we'll have some music at the end before we leave. Before we begin, though, I want to thank Tom Letness of the Heights Theater for allowing us to use this wonderful venue. Where is Tom? Oh, there he is. Back in the back corner. And I want to let you know that we have to be out of here promptly by 6:15 because Tom's got a movie coming in this evening. And if anybody wants to stay for the 7:10 showing of August Osage County. The Heights is the intersection of community and entertainment, and it kind of symbolizes the many lives of Kerry Ashmore. We're here today to celebrate the life of Kerry Cleveland Ashmore, a man of print, but of many other things, a musician, a teacher, a mentor, a community advocate. Needless to say, I got a lot of help from Margot Ashmore in preparing this. She suggested that I start us out with some of Kerry's many nicknames. Some of you will remember these. Mr. Ashmore was one of them, as in, "Nice tie, Mr. Ashmore," by Michael's student, in the days when most employers wanted their employees to call them by their first names, back in the 80s. Kerry was Henry to his best friend Malcolm Ritter, who was here somewhere. Margot wasn't entirely sure how that got started, maybe because they had a shared admiration for Henry Kissinger, and because Kerry was always a diplomat. Oh, and he called Malcolm Henry too, so there was a little confusion there. Kerry was also Mooseface. Perhaps someone here remembers the derivation of that one. Probably as simple as someone saying, "Wrong-o, Mooseface," and it stuck. Margot remembers an entire era of moose-related gifts. And of course, there's Cuppy, as you'll read in the Northeaster. That was short for cupcake, because Kerry as a newborn was as cute as a cupcake. And frankly, I think he was always that cute. When Kerry's nephew Michael was a baby, Kerry talked like a duck, teasing him with, "Come on, baby." I'm not a very good duck. Until Michael one day sassed him back with, "Stupid, uncle." Be careful what you say. We understand language long before we can speak it. Kerry's professional life in news began at the University of Minnesota. Taking a wrong turn off the elevator in Kaufman Union, Kerry stumbled into WMMR, the campus radio station. He was there for something relating to his music education track. He got interested in announcing and news in a perfect venue for a budding teacher. The station was student-run, and Kerry eventually served as the station manager. In those days, the teletype brought in news from the wire services. It was always working, and it was so noisy that they closeted it in the bathroom with the door closed. When the station appeared to be in financial trouble, Kerry grabbed one of those long sheets of teletype paper and posted a big note on the bulletin board, warning people not to spend even $1 without his approval. I'm not sure whether he ever had anyone ask him for approval. During Kerry's administration, news people at the station often fed the wire service with stories about the university. Perhaps that's where he got his passion for the scoop. Kerry maintained an interest in the more global picture while homing in on the local. He loved doing live remotes for national and local elections. Kerry met Margot Flugel at the radio station. She was a beginning news person who later became the assignment editor and snagged a few of those wire service bylines. They were married in 1977, both knowing they also wanted to work together. They hoped to maybe own a small-town radio station. Kerry followed Margot to an ill-fated news network in Nebraska. A few months later, they returned, broke, and moved into Kerry's parents' basement and rebuilt their life together. It was clear that the Twin Cities was where they needed to stay, ideally to build Kerry's music business as well as Margot's journalism career. Kerry landed next at Kaufman Union, this time working for MSA, the Student Services Corporation, that ran the stores at the U. This was back in the 80s, and the stores sold, among other things, smoking paraphernalia, which the university administration did not like. All sorts of legal stuff ensued, and Kerry became known as the Bong King. He defended the stores on principle, even though he didn't necessarily agree with the practice. And this would not be the only time that Kerry would do something like that. In the meantime, Margot was running a newspaper on the west side of St. Paul. After a couple of years of that, she decided to leave and find a sales job, recognizing that sales is a necessary skill if you're going to own a business. And that was still her and Kerry's dream. Nick Petrangelo, then the owner of the Northeaster, served on a committee of the Neighborhood and Community Press Association. When he heard of Margot's impending departure, he complained to her about the lack of young people in the newspaper business, young people who would be prepared to take over when old farts like him wanted to retire. And the rest, as they say, is history. In the Northeaster's earliest years, articles were prepared on typewriters, remember those? And then delivered to a typesetter who retyped them. Long nights were spent physically pasting up the paper's pages. Midnight rides delivered the pay stubs to a printing house, which turned them into negatives and printing plates, and finally, newspapers. The first innovation was generating type on a simple computer that allowed the typesetting house to receive something by wire and simply massage the files, getting rid of all the gaps. The Northeaster invested in typesetting equipment, but did not embrace desktop publishing until the programs available had those typesetting refinements already built in. Some of you may wonder what people did before email and Facebook made it easy to forward jokes and post funny photos. At the Northeaster, the staff was regularly invited to caption contests, where they would find rejected photos and put funny captions under them when the people were in odd positions. You'll find some examples of that out on the boards if you haven't seen them yet. Those were happy times, even though hardworking and long hours. In 1991, Margot and Kerry expanded into North Minneapolis, adding North News as if starting a chain or a string of pearls. Over the years, the newspapers had several editors and reporters. With them taking care of the routine reporting, Kerry took on several investigations and even sued some public bodies to get documents released. Two of the most positive results were these: the trouble with trusses about the faulty roof in the new Edison High School gym, and an investigation, thanks to Jeanette May's tip, that led to the federal government giving back land that had been taken for a proposed new interstate, I-335, that would have gone right through Northeast Minneapolis. Mark Anfinson is the first person most Minnesota Weekly and Country Daily newspapers call when they have a legal question. He found Kerry annoyingly ethical, as he refused to lobby for newspaper-related legislation. Carl Reichert, a friend of Margot's, is going to speak for Mark and read something that he sent.
Don't keep your baby grieving. Tell me you'll soon be leaving, and please pack your dancing shoes and come on back home to me.
So Mark wrote, "He was absolutely one of my favorites in the business. He was a natural journalist, born with the instincts. He was determined and dedicated to the story. Most journalists have a set of ethics and principles, but he was extraordinary in that it was just his nature. He wanted to get the story right. It was a result of his fundamental decency and fairness.
The economic reality is that most musicians have to have another job. Kerry knew at least two who were also in the journalism business: Robert Shaw, who could not join us today, and Dick Parker, who is here and would like to say a few words. Dick? Dick is a retired reporter with the Minneapolis Star and Tribune and an avid musician.
I'm a little feeble. I just had heart surgery in December, and last time I talked with Kerry face to face was the first Saturday in September when we played together with the Pig's Eye Band at the Eagles Club, and he was so encouraging, and I watched him go for about a year fighting cancer and not showing a sign of it, but still acknowledging that the battle was going on. But he inspired me quite a bit. After I had the surgery, I got a couple of emails from Kerry. I was very, very shocked when he suddenly passed away on the 27th. And I posted this on Facebook. Kerry Ashmore, a wonderful banjo and clarinet player with the Pig's Eye Jazz Band, the Moldy Figs, his own Minnesota Dixie, and many other traditional jazz bands, passed away January 27th. Kerry was also an award-winning journalist, the publisher of the Northeaster and North News in Minneapolis. Although he was fighting cancer for months, Kerry stayed active in all his pursuits and exuded optimism and positive attitude. He played his last gig on Saturday, 2 days before he died, an unpaid benefit with the Jumpin' Jehoshaphat's. Rest in peace, colleague and friend. Now here's a little story about when Kerry's parallel careers intersected. I believe this is in 1995. He won a Page One Award from the Society of Professional Journalists for an editorial that he had published in the Northeaster, and he'd written. He wasn't at the dinner to accept it, so I volunteered to get it to him the following week. So I ran into him once in a while through musical activities. And I was working at the Star Tribune, which was having some kind of a promotional event in a big tent in one of the parking lots. So I went down there, and Kerry had his Minnesota Dixie bunch there. And I was able to give him his journalism award while he was working for the Star Tribune as a banjo player. So that's about it. I miss Kerry, and I admired him. We had the same banjo teacher, but I only took 6 lessons, and he stuck around for a couple of years, so he was a tremendously better banjo player than I am. Anyway, thank you.
Dick mentioned the Jumping Jehoshaphat's, and their manager is Lindy Zabel, who was playing the piano earlier when you came in. Lindy is also a minister, and he'll be our final speaker before the musicians play again at the end of the event. In later years, with a smaller staff and different day-to-day responsibilities, Kerry took that passion for helping the reader and the community into different forms. He adjusted business practices to automate as much as possible while assuring accuracy. He helped spearhead new community initiatives and became a voice of experience. He moderated debates, and he was more than willing to play music for celebrations. In one of the first Northeastern newspapers that Kerry and Margot produced, a young Diane Loeffler was pictured alongside Tom Long, a colleague in one of the community groups that would form and change through the years. Still thinking young and creatively about how to make Minnesota a better place, Diane is now the state representative. Diane, would you like to say a few words? Well, I've been asked to speak on behalf of the community, which is a bigger role than anyone could ever play in this auditorium, except maybe Kerry himself, because he saw all of the communities he served as his own community. And I think back to when he and Margot, and just a few years out of college, decided to buy the Northeaster. And I can't imagine what an amazing adventure that was to them, but also what an act of courage. Because our community was always full of possibilities and good people who really cared about its future, and good sturdy homes that were loved, and businesses who had invested their dreams here. But we were a community in transition, and we had a lot of empty industrial and commercial buildings. Our commercial areas were struggling. We were still trying to chart our future. Who could have dreamed that we'd become the creative epicenter of Minneapolis, that we would have brew pubs on lots of different corners, and all kinds of grand things would happen. And I think that a lot of that progress since that point is due to the Northeaster and Kerry and Margot investing their career in our community. Because that's what a real newspaper is. It's a community builder. It connects us together. It helps us each celebrate every step forward, whether it's in our neighborhood or on the other side of the river or in a nearby suburb. It helps every organization be successful, because many of us have gone to fundraisers and programs and events that we had never known about if it hadn't been for the Northeaster telling us about it. It also was a good community instigator of new change and new thought. I think one of the things that Kerry most enjoyed was his writing of the editorials. And while sometimes they were playful and fun, they were always thoughtfully thought through and often made us think hard about what kind of a community we were and what were we becoming. Even in the early years when many celebrated our ethnic history and our diversity in terms of the Polish and the Lebanese and the Swedish and the Germans and others who had called our area home when they first came from other parts of the world. But we weren't always, way back then, as welcoming to new people. African Americans, people from Asia, people from other parts of the Soviet Union and other places, and he always challenged us as a community to step up and realize that they're just like our grandparents or great-grandparents. They too want a place where they can have a successful life for themselves and their family. And so it was through not only being an objective reporter and the stories and making sure that the reporters that he and Margot hired did the best in terms of professional journalism, it was also in that editorial role. But I must say, I did take tremendous pride through the years at all the awards that they earned, because that meant our paper was not only the best in our eyes, but it was in the eyes of the professional journalism community. Some of the times that I remember Kerry being at his most enjoying community events were the events that brought the entire community together. And he played a real key leadership role in several of those. One of those, the Harvest Gathering, in which all of Northeast, all different faiths, all different people of different ethnicities gather the Monday night before Thanksgiving. And to me, it is one of the most meaningful kickoffs to the holiday season we have. And that was always something that he enjoyed being part of. The other one that I think of is the one that we just recently celebrated, which is the President's Day celebration, which is always a fun, cold, chilly walk down the presidential streets of Northeast as our young people tell us amazing things about each of the presidents. They're honored with the streets named after them in our community, as well as the more recent ones, followed by an adult trivia contest, a chili feed, and Kerry was always just beaming and enjoying the activities of that gathering. Those will continue, and we'll always think about him there. One of the editorials that he wrote that I think is probably still a little controversial in our community was he decided that we should retire the term Northeast. And so in honor of Kerry, I will just say he was a true Northeaster. His heart always was invested in our community and its people, and he left us and the other communities he served a better place.
I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do?
journalists will remember their start at the Northeaster and North News. The newspapers also hired people who weren't necessarily formally trained, but were from the communities that we served, and helped them learn the craft. Kerry remained a teacher at the heart. There were also many community people and friends from other contexts who served in other necessary jobs relating to this small business: delivery, advertising, sales, layout and design, office work. They appreciated Mr. Ashmore's affable and kind manner. One of those longtime friends is Joy Judge, who became Kerry's companion for more than a decade when he and Margot separated. Margot has told me that she is grateful that Kerry found a dimension of life with Joy, and that he was able, especially in this last year, to spend time with friends and family and music, his first loves. Before we close, I'd like to ask Carl Reichert to come back again to read some pieces from people who have not been able to be here or who have asked him to speak on their behalf.
I just want to say it's a real honor to be reading these wonderful messages and thoughts about Kerry. I am the director of the Capri Theater in North Minneapolis, and Margot and Kerry have been very supportive of all things being developed in North Minneapolis and have been a real partner to all of us working on the north side, and we're very grateful for that. And it was always great to have Kerry at our events at the Capri Theater. So the first is from Kerry's nephew, Michael von Maltzen, and he writes, "In the early hours of Monday morning, January 27th, I lost one of the people I loved the most, and the world lost one of the greatest and most admirable people I have ever known. Very few people ever have the courage and sense of self to pursue their happiness and to measure their success by the amount of joy and passion they have in their lives rather than the size of their bank account. Kerry quietly and humbly did so and succeeded at every turn. While we lost him far too soon, he had more successes and he did more for the world that he lived in than most of us can ever hope to. He gave away kindness, compassion, and acceptance as if they were the most common gifts in the world, and contributed to his community and those that he met in ways that most people never even aspire to. I feel lucky, blessed, and insanely complimented to have been asked to help ease his passing, and I will always cherish those moments along with every memory and experience that we ever shared. Although the world is a much darker place without him, I take solace in how much brighter he made it simply by being who he was through every day of his life. He helped shape the person that I am today and will continue to inspire me to be better at that as the years roll by. Even though my sense of loss is intense and profound, it is overshadowed by the gratitude and insanely happy coincidence that made him a part of my family and such a huge part of my life. He is and always will be one of my heroes, and I will consider my life a resounding success if I manage to become half the man that he was. I reserve my sympathy not for all of those who feel his loss so intensely, but for those who were never lucky enough to know him." Senator John Marty wrote to Margot this on Facebook. "Dear friends, although I didn't know Kerry very well, I wanted to share a brief note with those close to him at Northeaster and North News. Reading Margot's column about Kerry, where he mentioned that one of his Ashmore relatives was a Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial writer for the Arkansas Gazette during the Civil Rights Movement, I know that Kerry had the same gift. Kerry's editorials were inspirational, they were educational, and certainly thought-provoking. Kerry appealed to the best instincts in each of us, our compassion, our interest in the community, and the well-being of every member of the community. If Kerry's editorials were published in a major national newspaper, he would have received a Pulitzer too. Because his writing for local papers was not seen by the Pulitzer judges, it's good to see that he was honored with the Frank Premack Award for his editorials, Minnesota's version of the Pulitzer. He was a consistently excellent editorial writer. As one who represented St. Anthony Village portion of the Northeaster circulation area in the Minnesota Senate from mid-1980s until redistricting last year, I remember clipping numerous Kerry Ashmore editorials over the years. They were worth reading and rereading. From his writing, it is clear that Kerry Ashmore was an exceptionally kind and caring person. I'll miss him, and I send my sympathy to all who knew and worked with him. And that was John Marty. And the final piece was submitted by Robert McGregor Shaw, the manager emeritus of the Minnesota Newspaper Association. And every Sunday in the mid-1990s, Bob Shaw played tuba with Kerry in a two-man combo at the St. Paul Radisson Hotel. They wore red vests, strolled around, and played good old Dixieland music for people eating their Sunday brunch. And Shaw writes, Kerry did most of the musical work with his banjo. My duty on the tuba was to strike fundamental tones on the beat. This banjo-tuba combo worked pretty well, but Kerry did the heavy lifting. My lifting problem was physical, lugging that tuba around, constantly hoisting it up and playing it. Tubas were not made for strollers. Kerry always called the tunes. For example, he would say, letter in C. And I'd sit right down and write myself a letter in the key of C. Or Saints in B flat, which was when the Saints go marching in B flat. Sometimes, though, he would call a tune I didn't know, and that was when his true musical genius always came through. All I knew about a new number was the key, which he called. But most tunes changed keys at what was called the bridge, or a different place, and then he returned to the original key for the final wrap-up. When we would come to the change in key on a new piece, Kerry would call out the tone I was supposed to play. He did this precisely at the right time, giving me 3 or 4 seconds to get ready. What I found remarkable is that he was able, while making that banjo sing in one key, to think ahead and advise me on how to play in a different key. All I had to do was just listen to Kerry and do what I was told. Worked just fine. I felt then, and do so now, that I was in the presence of a very remarkable musician. It was a privilege to play with him. I knew him first as the co-publisher of a good community newspaper, but boy, oh boy, could he ever play that banjo.
I just had to speak a little bit today because I happen to be Kerry's neighbor. And I guess I was privileged to have lived next to him, not really realizing his wisdom, his wit, and all the abilities and accolades he received today, he earned. One thing that impressed me is he was an excellent listener. He heard just about every word you spoke. Sometimes you wouldn't necessarily know he's absorbing what you said, but he remembered it. And many times he and I would talk and chew the fat, and he had things figured out before most of us even thought about it. So he was a very, very keen, wonderful human being with a great trainload of humility. And his humility impressed me. I didn't see him a lot because he was a pretty busy man. But when you did see him, he always had a good word and a short conversation and a big smile on his face. And when he was very, very sick and gradually started to get back on his feet, the guy was so determined to get back into the routine of feeling good, of getting his health back, that he was out there running whenever he could, and it was hard work for him because he knew he had to lose some weight and build his stamina. And I gave him a lot of credit for that because I used to run track in college, and I used to run. And if you had never done that much, it had to be extremely hard work. So he was a great guy, good neighbor, and he's going to be missed. Missed by me and my family, missed by my little dog. I got a little poodle that he just loved. And it's a shame. But you know, the Lord has a flower garden here on earth, and he also has a flower garden in heaven. And periodically, he gets pretty proud of the flowers that he has on earth. So now and then he'll reach down and he'll pluck that flower to bring up to heaven and put in his garden. And he was one of those flowers.
Our next presenter is Bonnie Scott, one of Kerry's sisters.
I have some stories from Kerry's long ago life, and I might not get through them all, but I wanted to start out by saying that there is an old saying that home is where the heart is, and Kerry's heart and home were extraordinary. For instance, he rescued many strays during his life. Most of them were cats, like Extra and PD, the office cats, and Doc, the upstairs cat in the house on Xerxes Avenue. But one beloved stray is a long-eared rabbit named Mr. Buns, who resides downstairs in the Xerxes house. And one of Kerry's rescues was me. When I decided to leave Minnesota for graduate school in California, Kerry opened a downstairs Xerxes spare room to keep my bed and dressers, so that during school breaks, I would have a place to come home to family. Many times in the very early morning, Kerry would return from late Dixieland gigs or newspaper deadlines, and I would wake to the pungent smells of fresh Timothy hay and pineapple juice. Who knew rabbits thrive on food like that? Who knew the combination could be so incredibly pleasant? Kerry was the keeper of our family history in many ways. When he was in junior high school, he had to spend some time in the hospital. To cheer him up, our mom gave him a stuffed purple hippo to keep him company during long and sometimes scary nights. 70 years later, Mom was in the hospital, and she woke to find the same purple hippo keeping her company. It's something now, and you can see the hippo out front. It's something now that can remind us all of the many joyful and happy times. Kerry liked to revisit familial history by going back to neighborhoods our family lived in. He had a knack for arriving at previous family dwellings when the current owners were home, and being so incredibly friendly, he was always invited in to see how the houses had been changed or kept the same. Amazingly, this didn't happen once. It happened in Minnesota, it happened in Indiana, and it even happened in California. As a toddler, Kerry was inseparable from a baby blanket named Night Night. Perhaps because of the Charlie Schultz character Linus with his blanket, Kerry maintained a special appreciation for the comic strip Peanuts. All the Peanuts characters express difficult, complicated life issues with simplicity and humor, and that was Kerry's skill as well. With an unparalleled gift for language, Kerry told important truths verbally and in print. He was courageous in all such endeavors. These are some of the special ways that he enriched our lives, and these are a few of the ways in which he will be missed. Thanks.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dolores Strand. I'm the co-chair of the Sister City for Columbia Heights and Womianki, Poland, And we are all indebted to Kerry and Margot for all the publicity they would give our sister city activities going back over 20 years. Not only whenever we had a project or fundraiser, a lot of fundraisers, they were so very helpful in helping us promote this. Also, Kerry helped us with another project. We sponsored a showcase for young authors and artists. The authors would submit their essays and poetry. We would judge that on the local level, and then the winners would go on to Washington, D.C. for national honors. And Kerry was one of our volunteer judges. We would sort of shy away from the poetry, but Kerry took all this in stride. He was very, very helpful and supportive of that particular activity. Another special project came about because Kerry's ingenuity. Here in this theater was the very first satellite communication between Columbia Heights, sister city people, and our sister city in Womianki, Poland, which is a suburb of Warsaw. So here on this stage in the big screen, thanks to Tom Letness's generosity also, Kerry arranged for this satellite lifetime exchange between the city council and mayor of Womianki, as well as the Columbia Heights mayor and our sister city members and our council members. That was in the late 90s during the mayoral term of Joseph Sturtevant. And what a thrill to be here talking to, now keep in mind there's a time difference. So that city council, I don't know, it's probably like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for them over there. But we had this very nice exchange. And when you were in front of the theater, and maybe Tom will remember this, they had the big dish out in front. I don't know if that's ever been duplicated, but that only came about because of Kerry's creativity. And again, communication was just so special for him. So for many ways, thank you. And isn't this a wonderful celebration of life? Just what we're seeing here. Thank you.
My name is Larry Leventhaw, and as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about what a Renaissance man Kerry Ashmore was. I first saw this back when I met Kerry many years ago. We were both working at the university student radio station, WMMR. I was in law school, and Kerry was just starting there as an undergrad. And this was a closed circuit, primarily station with a low power wattage around the general area. But he took it very seriously. Kerry's interest in music broadened the playlist and introduced additional types of music to those who are listening. His interest in news developed where it was no longer running out and reading what was on the teletype, but finding stories in the university community that could be projected onto the airwaves. Talents which we've seen he's further developed in later life. He always had a broad smile at the station, and he progressed to where he was station manager and where he brought many of his talents to bear with the business acumen, his love of music, news that is meaningful. Some years a couple years after I left the university, I had a call from Kerry saying that, well, he's no longer spending that much time on WMMR because he got a new job. Well, what is it? Well, he's moved downstairs and is running the student store. And he asked if I would work with him in challenging certain university policies and helping to develop product lines that were meaningful for students, developing policies. His business sense, his community sense. And I saw that again in a few years after that he called, and he and Margot had been working at a small newspaper. And he said they've been talking to the owner, maybe they'd like to buy it, because they think that there's a future in small community newspapers that can really serve the community. They felt that the then owner was doing a good job, and they'd like to take off from there and do some additional things. And he'd like to see that happen too. Can we work together, maybe get some type of contract where they can buy the newspaper? And of course, the Northeaster was purchased. Northeaster was purchased and developed. And as you look at the paper in its recent years, it's a remarkable paper. How many other papers can you think of that has solid journalism and has community announcement type of content about what's happening in the community? More and more, I think we see the large corporate press and the local things are basically shoppers with a lot of ads and maybe a schedule of some happenings, and that's it. The Northeaster has stood out, and that is because of the attention that Kerry paid to it, of his journalism. And hey, he was out selling ads too, to keep the paper going, and it kept going. And all this while he is pursuing a music career. And he wasn't just a musician, but like his selection of music at the university station, he was out there addressing audiences with music that met their taste and their needs. A few years ago, I was involved in a convention of Laurel and Hardy clubs, of all things. And Kerry arranged for these people from the country, throughout the country, to go down the river with Dixieland jazz, playing, among other things, some Laurel and Hardy songs. And he talked in terms about the movies. He learned them and knew them, and was able to relate very well to that audience. So I think here, where we're celebrating Kerry Ashmore, we have to recognize we're celebrating a very unique person. We know that somehow his smile is going to last. We know that the Northeaster has a solid basis and will be continuing for years. And I think even, although we cannot know everything, if we look towards the heavens, there's probably some new melodic music with a decidedly Dixieland beat.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Ostro, and I had the real privilege of representing Northeast Minneapolis for 12 years on the city council. And so many great things have already been said about Kerry. But what I want to just mention is his integrity. And as someone who he wrote about, what that meant to me, and I think it means to the whole community, because when Kerry wrote a story, he wanted to get it right, not just so some politician wouldn't call and yell at him, but because he in his heart cared so deeply. I remember at least a couple times when he reached out to correct something that wasn't even very significant in my opinion, but it was so important to him for that to be right. And I thought of this recently because I learned only recently that the Minnesota News Council doesn't exist anymore, as I understand it, which I think is a real loss. For those of you who don't know, the Minnesota News Council was kind of a watchdog over newspapers and took complaints about it. And I talked sometimes with Kerry about what that work meant to him. But that was just a great thing about Kerry, was his unquestioned integrity, and I'll miss him along with everybody else.
Kerry usually had to deal with both of us, so in different capacities sometimes. And so to everyone who's here, I want to say our deepest condolences, and especially to Margot and his family. Kerry has been just an extremely special person to us, and in many ways got our juices going. Sometimes because he said what he said, and sometimes because he said what he didn't say. But in either case, we have a couple words that, this is unrehearsed, so we hope it goes off well. We never know.
At any rate.
Yeah, no, we won't be singing.
Yeah.
And that'll be good for all of us.
Yeah, you'd all leave if we did that. Just a few words to I think, capsulize what Kerry meant to us. He was warm.
Approachable.
Kind.
Pitching.
Friendly.
Attentive.
Helpful.
Present.
Neighborly.
Thoughtful.
Level-headed.
Insightful.
Upbeat.
Smiling.
He had a contagious smile.
He had a contagious smile. As a community, yes, he did. We should clap. We should clap. That's what I think we always remembered about him. As a community member, what happened to the community was reflected in our community newspaper. And when, as a council member, I was trying to reshape North Minneapolis and what it really meant to the community and to all of us, Kerry and Northeaster and Margot were always there, taking pictures at the groundbreaking, pitching and talking in so many positive ways about who we were. And for all of us, making us proud to live in North Minneapolis, making us proud to be Northeasters, making us proud to live in the city of Minneapolis, and making us proud to support the Northeaster. And so in each and every way, he helped all of us have a little step in music in our steps. And I won't forget all of the times that Margot and Kerry wrote about and talked about and took pictures about all the things that I think we care about as a community and helped us shape who we are today. I actually believe in angels, and I hope you do as well. And I think the angels have a new tune, probably one or two, and are swaying to the banjo of a really magnificent person that we've had the opportunity to share just a little bit, and hopefully we can participate in the music and the swaying at some point in our afterlives. So I just want to thank all of you, and especially Margot and Kerry, for being so much a part of who we were and who we are.
You were home on God's blessed shore.
And I have a little Novocaine from the dentist, so I hope you can understand me. But I have been a member of NEMA, the Northeast Minneapolis Arts Association, for a long, long time. And I know that Diane already mentioned all the great studios. But I think that the Northeastern newspaper, Margot and Kerry, were really instrumental in bringing the arts to Northeast and really promoting Art of Whirl. And back in the early days when we were trying to get all that going, we really relied pretty heavily on the publicity that we got from the newspaper, and I will forever be grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank everybody for coming and get rid of that little bit of feedback we have there. It means a lot to myself and to our staff that everybody came and stayed, and I know you're going to have other stories that you want to share with each other. I'm glad that we've had this time, and I understand that there's some music to send us out. I think what Susie said initially was we put it all in print. So thank you again, and Kerry's in our memories.
A lot's been said about Kerry. He was a kind man, we all know that. He was a funny man, we all know that. He was a talented man in many ways, musically and otherwise. And I just want to add that he was a generous man. And you all know that. And I just want to tell you, you might not know, we've known him as a Jehoshaphat about 12, 15 years. We're not exactly sure when he came. Probably played 300 concerts. And when the Jehoshaphat's play, we only do benefit concerts. So he'd go out with somebody else and he'd get paid. But when he played with us, he always donated his time and he donated his money to the causes. And I just want to know, I wanted you to know that he had that kind of a heart. You knew that. At my church, when people go out, and he's played at my church a couple of times, we always say, go out and love each other and love the community. And that's what Kerry did, didn't he? We're going to send him off now. All the musicians, I invite all the musicians here to come up. We're going to do a little song called When the Saints. And Kerry was and is a saint. When the saints go marching in.
We are marching in the footsteps of those who've gone before. Soon we'll all be reunited on that far and sunlit shore. Oh, when the
us all sing.